Welcome back, everyone, to Open Line. We have with us Dr. Thomas Schwartz, Vanderbilt political science professor, talking politics, but we've kind of started talking about the Electoral College, which I think is a fascinating discussion. I want to go back to our first caller, Marcus. He was upset about Cassida not retiring. We covered that. Then he said he's a Democrat, but he believes Democrats are not going to win. They're going to blow it, is what he said. I think that's interesting. And if we look at, should Democrats be concerned about that? I guess. You know, when you hear his concerns that they're going to blow it, in some ways, is this an election Democrats should win as you look back on history? Is it one they should not win? And kind of what are we set up for, in your opinion?
Well, actually, if there were a more traditional president, I think the Democrats would not win, generally. The economy is good. Americans usually prefer 8 years for their president before throwing them out and getting a changed election, so it would not be the case. But because we have such an unusual president, so unorthodox and so alienating to half of the electorate, there is the feeling that this is the election for the Democrats to lose. They should beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump should not be president of the United States. And that was the feeling in 2016, and it is the feeling of many Democrats now that this should be the case. And so I can understand the frustration will be there. Certainly if they do not defeat him, I think there will be a great deal of frustration on the Democratic side of the ticket.
And what do you think, for Democrats to win, what do you think they have to do? Certainly they'll tap into the frustration some people have with Trump. Bottom line is there's a big portion of people that like Trump, so that's not going to do it. What do Democrats actually need to do if they are going to win?
I think they have to unite behind a candidate that, without sort of tearing that candidate apart in the primaries and then at the election. They have to have sort of a solid ticket, one that has a sort of a national appeal. And I think they have to reassure the middle group, which is not a huge group anymore in the United States, that middle bit of the electorate. It's undecided that they're not going to overturn everything. This is where it gets a little fuzzy with the issue of socialism or moving too far to the left. That might scare off some voters. The other side of the argument, and I should present it here, is that what they really need to do is excite their electorate. If they can get their electorate to turn out, they'll win. There's sort of these competing theories. You either get your people out by having a very exciting, perhaps very progressive outlook, or you have a more reassuring and moderate, and you steal the center and you win that way. My own sense, and that may reflect, I could very much be wrong on this, is that the center it makes more sense for them to win, but you can't test these theories easily.
That's interesting. Those are competing theories there. That's okay. Very interesting. Let's go to Lucy. Lucy, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm fine. Hey, y'all, listen, I just want to say, what about the frustrated independent, okay, like me? I can't buy into the deep fake state of Trump. The Republicans are not offering the independents anything to go for. I'm not going that crazy. I'm sorry. And I'm tired of seeing crazy with the Republicans. They have lost their minds. You know, usually you could find a good balance of a Republican somewhere in the state of Tennessee and a Democrat. And the crazies were off in the corner somewhere. You know, the professor sitting there is talking about the red state. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with a red state, but when you've got a super majority that's so imbalanced, that's where the crazy comes out, drops its drawers, and shows the public its ass every time without fail. So I want to go into this speech about Bernie Sanders. I didn't see it at all today, but you know, these terms about socialism, people need to really study this and understand what socialism is. Communism, they need to go back and study the Gilded Age, because it was the Gilded Age that got so sick and greedy rich that they didn't want to pay their labor anything. You know, it was being exported out of Europe like crazy. They didn't want to pay them anything. So it was the oligarchs that came up with this theory of a communist state. And they led on these socialists, these Marxists over in Russia, to get the people together and to buy into the hope of a socialist state. And after, Lenin got in, he slaughtered them all, the ones he didn't send to the gulag. And that failed. They threw him out. He nationalized everything, and they threw him out of the country, and then they came up with Hitler. And the same people that brought us communism brought us Hitler. And so I was trying to figure out what's going on right now. I've seen this somewhere, I've read this somewhere, and it was written perfectly how what we're seeing right now, the way we're going with the imbalance of power, that the absolute power of the White House, ignoring Congress and all this. There is a book. I take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
It's called
Okay.
The Rise of the Fourth Reich by Jim Mars.
Right.
On page 7 through about 11, it perfectly describes where we're going and where we're at. And I think that book came out about 10
And what are you
years
saying?
ago.
It's what?
What I'm
Bottom
saying
line is
we're going to an absolute power, and we better watch out. And everybody's drunk on their guy being in. Democracy doesn't work with you're drunk with glee that your guy's in. What it is, we've got a job to do, and we're not doing anything. So,
all right, Lucy, thank you. Thank you. All right, that's not a pleasant viewpoint. It's not one that others don't have. Others certainly have that viewpoint. What do you think about what she's saying there? Where we're headed, looking at history? I'm interested in what she said about Germany and the Soviet Union. That's interesting. But she's saying we're headed toward an absolute power. We better wake up. We better watch out.
Well, that has been, in a way, when Joe Biden's comment that Donald Trump is an existential challenge is part and parcel of that, in a sense of seeing Trump and his behavior as threatening the very basic elements of American democracy and American freedom. And the idea of a sort of demagogic president who rides roughshod over the Constitution, over Congress and the courts, will be part of the narrative, I think, of the Democratic Party as it attacks Trump. And Trump, of course, contributes to some of this in his behavior, but it's also a political way. That was the great fear that many people had of Trump coming in, that he's someone who talks in demagogic terms. I'll fix things. I will do it. I'm the one who's going to solve all these problems. And so there's a sort of instinctive reaction against that among many Americans who think that sounds dictatorial. And certainly the caller was referring to a lot of books and other things that have come out in the last few years that have sort of made this point about Trump, and seeing him as part of a larger world element of people like Putin, of Xi Jinping in China, Erdogan in Turkey, autocrats around the world who are trying to sort of seize power and sort of violate democratic norms.
And Lucy's saying we can't just be happy if our guy is in.
Right.
And I think she's saying that to both Democrats and Republicans, that we should kind of hold their feet to the fire, both sides.
Right.
Has there been a time in history where people were so focused on partisan victories that they perhaps overlooked things? And I'll say Democrats and Republicans are doing this. Certainly there's criticism on the part of the Republican Party right now.
Right.
But have we seen a time in history where that has happened as much as it may be happening now?
Well, certainly Germany in the 30s would be characteristic of that, of people overlooking the fact. I mean, the Nazis come to power through democratic means. They don't seize it. I mean, in the sense they win elections because people are so frightened, so terrified, so willing to scapegoat others that they're willing to overlook what were clearly dictatorial elements. In American history, certainly there have been moments of crisis where we've faced that challenge, the Depression, World War II, Civil War, but thankfully that hasn't happened in the same manner.
And do you feel like our Constitution can withstand something like that? Would Germany not have happened here under those same circumstances with our Constitution?
Our Constitution has proven very resilient. It's hard to say that it could withstand all sorts of challenges. There were moments in our past after assassinations, wars, and that, in which things were, and there were very serious issues. There was a very interesting observation recently about 1940 and right before World War II, where the two sides in the United States were so divided about whether to enter that conflict, and there was very sharp and almost violent antagonism on that score. So we've had challenges. Our Constitution has made it through, but I don't think anyone should ever blindly think that it will always do that.
I think that's good advice. All right, we're going to take a break. Fran, I promise we'll get to your call right after this. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.